Go ahead, baby, do it proud. Let your head down, say it loud. Never stop, let the world know now. You need to bear it all, bear it all, bear it all.
I'm Daryl, and this is A Little for the World, a home for BIPOC creatives, and a place to play. Hi, Preston. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
They're all pretty good. Yeah, just working on stuff in my studio right now. Yeah, this is what I do every day, seems like.
Amazing. Where are you currently located?
I live in Halifax, Nova Scotia right now.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Awesome.
here for like 2 years at this point. It's been really nice. Yeah, I was living with my parents in Edmonton, Alberta, for a long time. I decided that I wanted to continue my like fine arts degree um, at NASCAD University. So I moved with a couple roommates all the way over here about 2 years ago. Um, at this point, I'm done with my degree, which is just my Bachelor of Fine Arts. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Feels good.
Well, congratulations. Um, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about this journey, whatever you're willing to share. But beginning with how the both of us met, we met through a BIPOC peer mentorship called Making Space.
Yeah,
Um, and it has been a pleasure, like, to get to experience some of your work in the time that I did. Can you share what your creative process is and what it is like?
sure. No, a lot of my works are sort of, how do you even say it? I sort of do these quilted paintings. So they're often fairly large scale, but not always. A lot of mix of large and small scale stuff. Uh, Usually on unstretched canvas or linen. And what I sort of do is I usually make a painting first, and then based on whatever sort of image or narrative I have going on in the work, I will make some sort of quilted backing for it, and then sort of finish the work by sewing the work, um, including like the standard sort of quilted batting that you would put in a normal quilt that you would use, um, and then finishing off the edges. Uh, yeah,
And I did let you know before this that anything that I ask you, I'll be answering myself as well. So a little bit of my about my creative practice. I do a lot of writing mostly, and a lot of it is for if I'm not writing for something like an exhibition or preparing for something, it's usually for like just my health. But I have been writing a fiction novel for the past 2 years, and it's been very much inspired by real life and like some of the people that I've met within the past few years and my own life. And I have been dancing for the past year now, year and a half, and the two practices have been so braided into each other. And writing was like my way of processing a lot of experiences and like grief and um like taking back my identity from personal experience that I experienced growing up, and then dancing more and allowing myself to to explore those dreams as well. I feel like I've come to face myself even more and like realize where so much more healing needs to take place within myself. Um, and like the trouble with being seen and performance and all that. Um, but yeah, so writing this book has been a great way for me to like reflect through a character that is not me but has similar experiences. But it also allows me to play with these ideas of me being more flamboyant, this character seemingly moving a lot quicker than I am. Like I have fun with playing through this person's story with how I wish my story to turn out. So that's fun.
yeah,
I wanted to ask you about your art, because I do follow your Instagram and I do know that you have been sharing your work in galleries for a while now. What stories are you telling in your art, and whose stories?
I would say you and I have a certain thing in common in this sort of idea of it's interesting to hear you talk about this character in your novel that's, I don't know, in some way a reflection of you, even though it's not actually you. Um, that's sort of the lens that I've uh, thought about the people in my paintings um, through. I usually don't paint from life. They're usually not real people. Um, but in some way they're sort of, I don't know, embodiments of different fragments of things that I encounter in my real life. So um, yeah, they usually all come from sort of a mashup of different source material, and that can be uh, found images or images that I've taken, um, just different things that I've seen and things that sort of uh, kept themselves like in my memory, and I want to sort of bring them out like into um, yeah, the space of a painting. And yeah, I don't know. In terms of the narratives that I paint, um, I think they've always sort of been a little bit ambiguous, or in some cases even like strange. Um, some of my earlier works, like my earliest works, like a painting called "Your Skin Behind the Lattice," uh, it's like of this three-armed, or what appears to be a three-armed person sitting on a bed, holding up a flower, um, like an embroidered flower. And on the surface of the painting is this sort of embroidered text that I wrote. Uh, and the content of that text is sort of about this idea of peeling back layers and getting towards like what would be the truth. Um, so that was sort of where I was going with my earlier works. These days, I don't know. Uh, I'm in the process of making stuff for a couple of shows right now, and um, in many ways, the works are the same in the regard of uh, figures sort of embodying something other than myself. Something that I've sort of had in my head for a while is this aspect or this idea of surrender, and what that means as a viewer to encounter um, a painting or any work of art. Uh, there's a certain amount of like giving up of yourself in order to fully receive um, whatever message, or not even message, but whatever's in the work. And and in a way, it's sort of like an unconscious thing, like for myself, like going through galleries, just looking at art, finding out what I like or what resonates with me isn't something that's necessarily a conscious choice. It just sort of happens, or it doesn't happen. Um, for me, that idea is interesting. So I'm sort of trying to merge that uh, idea of like the actual act of surrendering with other things like spiritual surrender or surrender to nature. Um, everything's
Well, and I think it's amazing that when you were describing the painting, you were describing like because I've seen it and I was able to envision it. I felt like I resonated with that painting a lot. Can you tell me the name of it again?
yeah, your skin behind the lattice.
Mm. I think that was one of the first things of yours that I saw.
Yeah, that's a yeah.
Um, I would say I think the stories that I'm telling, it does change a lot, but I feel like overall for me it's really just about um always finding myself having to fight to return to a place of proudness or safety or sanctuary within in such a moving world where everything is like just filled with expectations. And I wrote a song with a friend called Uneasy, my friend Shadia, and one of the lyrics that I wrote was expectations make it hard to befriend the truth of these scars. And I feel like that is something that I explore a lot in my writing. And just like a way to honor myself without having to like be in conversation about these things. And just feeling like a lot of what I believe in or a lot of what I feel can be conflicting for other people. And so instead of talking about it with lots of people, I usually write about it because I feel like it's a lot more safe to process it there. Um, I do find myself writing about Black experiences, and I think I was doing that before I realized I was. Um, and yeah, I wrote this short book or zine, whatever you want to call it, for an exhibition with Making Space called Tending a Speak Mountain. And the exhibition was called The Soil Between Plants. But the book that I wrote was called Tending a Speak Mountain. And I wrote a lot about this sense of like combing through experiences to return to self or like go back to find the pieces. Um, and that's just a simpler way to put it. But a lot of the pieces I wrote about um, it's like a fictional experience of a lot of what I experienced growing up and how it made me feel and what it deposited into me as. And I paint this image of all these flowers around me and like how they make me feel and my relationship to flowers and how they make me feel safe and how they feel supportive. Um, yeah, and speaking of flowers, I've noticed there are flowers in your works. Do you want to talk about that? Is there significance or is it something that finds its way or both?
Um, yeah, there's a lot of flowers in my works. I don't know. I think they have sort of held different meanings in different paintings. Um, like in that work, Your Skin Behind the Lattice, that flower, which was a calla lily, was just sort of like um, an offering for the viewer to sort of get closer to the work. Um, in a more recent work, uh, which I also have on my Instagram, it's called 31 Years of Roses. Um, it's of this man sort of sitting on a stool in what could be seen as a garden filled with wild roses. And um, there's like an aspect of tending there, just like with what you're describing with the um, work that you made for Making Space. Um, he's sort of tending these roses. And that work, that's one of the, I would say, a few works that sort of responds specifically to um, a poem that I didn't write. It's a poem by Henry Dumas titled Rose Jungle. And yeah, it's a very short poem. And um, just Dumas' uh, language and his imagery was so compelling in that work for me that um, I don't know. I didn't want to create this work as some sort of homage to him, or even it being my version of the poem, or like how I see it, but uh, just sort of taking that written imagery, which is already so lush in the poem, and then I don't know, sort of retranslating it through um, yeah, my own way of working. But um, yeah, I don't know. They sort of have different meanings. Like in some works, I've actually put real flowers in the painting. and sort of like cast them in acrylic gel medium. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like flowers have different meanings, and can find their way into pieces for so many different reasons. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I also wanted to ask you about colors because I noticed that in a lot of your paintings, the skin of the people in your paintings have a lot of, how would I describe it? Colors as patches, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm, I don't know. I would say that like my way of working, which I've sort of developed over time, is these sort of um, yeah, almost like patches or like hatch-like marks. Uh, it's just the way that I sort of I don't know, like see form when it comes to skin, I would say. Um, I don't really know if it's like a stylistic thing, but it's just sort of a way of understanding the form of um, whatever it is I'm trying to paint. And it's interesting because, uh, yeah, there's something sort of like patchworky in some cases, which in some way maybe connects to the aspect of quilting that appears on the back of the works. Um, yeah, like in this work behind me, like how I sort of work these days is I'll like stretch the canvas and then prime it, and then do an underpainting, usually in like one solid color. So in this case, it's like this sort of magenta pink. And um, yeah, I do that because I want there to be some sort of um, aspect of like luminosity that shines through. So um, yeah, sort of patchy way of working. It's sort of like how you would see like any painting, like any museum. Like the closer you get, the more it sort of dissolves, and you can see sort of how the work is made. And then the further away you get, it sort of coalesces more, um, which I find just a really interesting idea. And um, yeah, I don't know. In some works, like even like this one, like my video camera is like probably not the best, but uh, yeah, that effect sort of happens. But maybe it's also um, I don't know, like a way of camouflaging in some way, or uh, yeah, having some different optical effect.
Yeah, I really love the way that you work or the way that you portray these figures. I find it so invigorating, and I feel so transported into these moments or experiences. And there's one that you painted, I believe it was a dancer. I know they had on like these pretty pink shoes and they were in front of a mirror. And you could see like something a bit more authentic portrayed in the mirror. Yeah, I really, really appreciate how your paintings tell stories without any context a lot of the time. I feel like there's so much room for interpretation and for um journey. And I think it's amazing that you could look at it once and experience it a certain way and maybe look at it another time and experience more. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I actually wanted to ask you, uh, 'cause you draw as well, right? Or sometimes. I just want to know
Sometimes.
the relationship between, um, I don't know. I just find it interesting, like this relationship between language and writing, and then other forms of expression or working, like dance and sometimes drawing? Like how do those relate for you?
Yeah, I draw sometimes. And I love to sketch, I will say, but I do paint, and I do draw sometimes. I paint more than I draw, but whenever I do, there's always flowers involved somehow. Like either I'm painting flower fields. I feel like that is just like second nature for me when I sit down without anything planned. Or I am painting myself. Like I like to do self-portraits, but it's always something very weird or different than what I'm seen as, I feel. Um, I painted this one I painted this one canvas and it's like a flower field and then there's mountains and then there's me dancing on top of the mountains with like my hands are flowers instead. Like my hands are made into bouquets of flowers. Um and it's just me on the land. And I think that is more of like what sanctuary is inside of me. When it comes to painting, I really enjoy that it can be you can do anything you want. I feel like it doesn't have to be anyone's idea of what a great painting is, and I love that. And it can be perceived in so many different ways. Like people who do a lot of abstract work or people who do paintings that may be perceived as like very childish. I feel like I lean more toward that. Um, like everything is up for interpretation. Everything can make you feel something, even if it's so distorted and blurry.
Well, see, that's sort of like um, what we're in the business of doing, like as artists, uh, like whether it's painting or dancing or writing or music or any of this stuff, it's sort of all in this realm of feeling, like trying to convey a feeling through um, whatever medium it is. It's kind of the only like lifestyle or um, I don't really want to use the word profession, but uh, that sort of deals with that in like a real way. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's I think there's importance in it. And what you were saying earlier about like you dancing in this like military base, that really reminds me of this photograph by Alvin Baltrop. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but I can send you after. He was a photographer during the like 1970s and 80s in New York City. Um, and like his photographs are like documents of the cruising culture that was going on in the piers at the time. Anyways, I just think he's like fantastic. So I'll send you.
Do you recall any experiences or times in your life where you created something beautiful from it?
I'll say that's sort of why I started doing art in the first place. Um, and I'm sure that's the case for a lot of people. But yeah, for me, I just found it and like I guess still find it um, just a totally free place where like my paintings aren't. I don't necessarily look at them as like ideal spaces or um, anything like that. So aspects of the world around me, I think, are still present. Um, and whether I like it or not, they absolutely inform like the reading of my work. Um, so uh, yeah, it's I don't know, it's a complicated thing for me. Um, but a painting like an early work like Lucky to Be Me, um, that's a work like there's a central figure in that work and he sort of has these different arms, like all these different arms, and he's wearing pants and the pants sort of come off the canvas his feet sort of come off the canvas. And then there's a small like bit of text at the top right of the painting. And the text is sort of like what the title is, like it's about sort of finding rest amongst this internal and external chaos, and then sort of realizing like how lucky to be me. Painting is a space where I can like when we say like a painting is sort of like a true thing, or like you're trying to get at the truth in a painting, I feel like all of your triumphs and all of your failures are evident on the surface. So I feel like I can put everything that I feel like I'm not as a like in real life, I can put that in a painting. Um, so it's like a mix of your best and your worst selves sort of uh, ending up on the canvas. And um, there is an aspect of control in that. Like that's through uh, like years and years of just honing the craft, and um, uh, it's not even as simple as technical, but yeah, just all of the language that comes with painting and quilt making too. But yeah, it's like I just feel like it's a real like capture of a moment in time. Like all of your mistakes are like all of my mistakes are there. Um, I can try to cover them up, but you'll still see the evidence of me trying to cover them up. I don't know. I think that's just something that's sort of in the work and like in the way that I think about it and like sort of why I do it.
That is a very beautiful way to express that. And it makes me think of many things, but it makes me think of I was watching this for one of my choreography classes, I was watching this video and these choreographers were describing this experience for this piece they were making. And someone said, I don't like seeing dancers or actors on stage. I like seeing people. And it made what you just said made me think about that, like just seeing someone um, in that present moment and or seeing someone's work or creations and seeing them in it and seeing, like you said, their failures and their successes and all parts of them. um and even this end of the year performance that I did called Hope in the Hyphenated Spaces, all the labor was being shown as it's not necessarily the finished product, but where it left off, where it was for them. Um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like that's like I feel like that's the whole thing. Like that's why I'm interested in uh, art. It's like the human aspect. Um, I don't know. Like I like when I go and visit a gallery or something and I see a painting. Like if the edges aren't perfectly clean, or sometimes like I've been in a gallery where um, the canvas isn't perfectly stretched and there's like a ripple in it, or like I was doing ceramics at school, and when you're working with clay, your fingerprints, like every time you touch it, it's embedded in the material. Um, and like certain artists, like they'll work to sort of remove the evidence of their own hand in it. But what I just find interesting and what I find beautiful about it is seeing the trace of someone else's hand and what they've done. Like it's just makes it more accessible.
definitely, definitely. I also wanted to ask you about the storytelling of eyes. I noticed that in your paintings, in some of your paintings, there are also uh, still moments where you get to look into the eyes of some of the humans in your creations.
Yeah. I think the presence of another gaze in the painting, I'll say it has been a central thing for me in certain works or certain, I think, bodies of work. Um, in a lot of my earlier works, which is changing a little bit now, but still kind of the same. There was always usually only one figure in the painting. It's about this connection with the figure, which is also a connection with me, like the person who made it. Um, and the presence of eyes, I think I don't know, they carry so much meaning, like so much is conveyed through uh, in a work like a painting called Love for Sale. It's a large, like tall painting with this man sort of cradling this other man who's sort of slouched over. Um, and the man who slouched over has his eyes closed, whereas the figure behind him has the eyes open, looking out at the viewer. Sort of like this is true for, I think, in a lot of my works, that everything you see is not exactly what it seems. So, the painting is called Love for Sale. Um, so, my thinking in that was like, what is for sale? Uh, this sort of intimate embrace of these two characters, these two figures, which could be, I don't know, perceived as some sort of love, but why is it for sale? Who's selling it? Um, when it comes to the gaze of figures, like the gazes of figures, I think they definitely change from work to work, but it's usually a deliberate thing I'm trying to do.
I wanted to ask you about creative environments. Um, I know that you create in the gallery, I mean, in the art studio, sorry, most of the time. Um, what is that your practice usually like? And do you ever find yourself creating outside of the studio?
Um, well, I don't know, it sort of changes. Early on, I was literally just making paintings like in my bedroom, uh, uh, just stretching, or not even stretching, but more just painting a loose canvas on the wall. Um, that was when I was working with acrylic paint, not oil paint. I couldn't really do that now. Um, but yeah, uh, like all of the painting happens in the studio. I'm lucky to have a space here in NSCAD for the summer, um, because it's really hard to find studio spaces in Halifax. Um, I do have a small studio uh, elsewhere in the city, which is like a more permanent thing, which is good. Um, but like some of my works are pretty big, so um, yeah, I kind of those works are dependent on the amount of space that I have. Um, but all of the quilting that I do, like any textile element, still takes place like in my bedroom, pretty much. Yeah, I'll just take the paintings home.
Do you paint to music at all?
Most of the time, yeah,
Yeah.
just like headphones.
Mhm. What are your go-to artists right now?
Oh, I have my phase, but recently I've been listening to Terry Callier, kind of jazzy, but not really jazz. He had a folk album early on that I like. What about you?
I also love music without lyrics. I've been listening to Anne Sweeten. She's a pianist that my friend Shadia introduced me to randomly once when we were working on our song together. At the time, it was 2021, and I was going back and forth to Jersey because she was still a student at Monmouth campus. So I would just come from New York to Jersey, like literally like 3 weekends back to back, so we could finish our song. Um, and she introduced me to Anne Sweeten, and I started listening to her music like on my way back and forth. And there's this one day I heard this song called Philadelphia 22, but I didn't know the name of it yet, but I heard it as I was doing something, and I was like, this song sounds like a conduit in a way. Like it sounds like I'm being called to do something, and it was just sweet but also very eerie at the same time. Like dark but also soft. Like it goes back and forth, and I loved it so much. But when I discovered the title, I was like, Philadelphia 22. Like I don't know, I took it as a message in a way, and I ended up going to dance school, Philadelphia in 2022. Like, I don't know, I just felt like I was very led by that song. But Anne's music in general is very beautiful. I was even listening to a new piece of work she put out called Love Walks Through Rain, I think, before we started recording. But other artists that I love to listen to while creating or in general is Cleo Soul. Cleo Soul's a really great artist. I do also love jazz. I like to listen to Miles Davis. Um, Kind of Blue, of course.
Okay.
And my favorite song on that album is Blue and Green.
Yeah.
I love that song so much. If I had to choose one jazz song to take with me for the rest of my life, it would be Blue and Green.
That's a great choice.
Um, Chet Baker sings, and I love Alicia Keys. Like any, especially old Alicia Keys and the Alicia album that came out in 2020. I am a really big Alicia fan. And like even just watching interviews of her speaking, honestly, is enough for me. I love that song. I also wanted to ask you what is the significance in using cloth?
But those earlier works, like they were unstretched, unprimed canvas, and I was doing like embroidery on them. So uh, I don't know, paintings aren't necessarily these like solid things. That's what I sort of uh, like stuck onto early on, was that a painting is on fabric. So um, in a way, there's like a link to textiles in there. Um, and yeah, my sort of interest in that started first with uh, doing things like embroidery, but recently it's like been quilting. It allows the work to have two sides, which paintings usually don't, or usually aren't seen as having. Um, so, like my ideal display of a lot of these works would be to hang them from the ceiling so that others viewing them can see both sides. Um, in terms of my like choice of fabrics, like uh, depends. Like I like a lot of leathers and suedes and um, velvets, just fabrics that have an interesting uh, texture or color. It's just, I mean, it's sort of like paint in a way. Um, and the quilts aren't usually, I don't think I've done like a figurative quilt. So they're always sort of material like first, showing the material first, or um, I guess like in a way abstract.
Um, yeah, I also wanted to ask you about individuality. Obviously our creations are so individual, whether they are things that have been done before or not, because it comes from such an authentic place. But I wanted to ask you if, and I feel like we talked about this earlier a little bit, but do you find yourself appearing in the things that you make?
Um,
I think the better question is, in what ways do you find yourself appearing in the things you make?
yeah. Um, hmm. Yeah, there hasn't been like a self-portrait yet. There will be, that interested. Um, but yeah, I feel like as of now, any sort of um, reference or uh, yeah, like of my own life appears sort of obliquely in the work. Uh, like in a lot of these sort of recent works, there's a lot more like nature in them. Yeah, but it's, I don't know, it's the nature that I'm interested in isn't like this idealized idea of nature. And it's like the nature that I experience every day, like in the city of Halifax. Like it's this sort of urban or suburban um, idea of nature sort of coming through, even though a lot of it is like manufactured, like it's a sort of constructed thing, like parks and trees that you find. But what's interesting to me about that is we can sort of tame or manicure or find some way to control nature, but it still exists. It still sort of, um, I don't know, has its own life. So I would say that since moving here, like living in Halifax, the paintings have, I don't know, like gone outside more. Like there's more, I don't want to say urban, but like urban natural space in the works. Like, yeah.
Another artist asked me about my relationship to flowers, and I never really thought about it. It's just something I just went with. Because the past 2 years I got so used to like doing a lot more on my own and just letting myself like go with what I gravitate to. And so when he asked me that, like I don't tend to realize anything. I just do things basically. And he asked me that and it made me think about it. And I was like, I think it's just my way of mending my relationship with myself. And yeah, it made it feel more complicated though when he asked, because I have a like it was just when you have this knowing, sometimes it's harder to reflect that on the outside, and sometimes it's hard to answer questions about it. And so I do find this sense of comfort in just doing my own thing a lot of the time because I don't really have to explain it to anyone else. But I'm glad he asked because it helped me realize that. Like I think um sometimes flowers is my way of like acknowledging myself really and my efforts, and other things, and that shows up in like things that I write, or in paintings. And I find myself appearing and dancing in my dancing in ways where um resistance or restraint or like trying to resist my own resistance, pushing away. I noticed that when I improv in studios alone, I do a lot of like I use imagery a lot, and so I'll like push something away from me or try to like get myself out of something. And I think that speaks to where I've been for the past year and a half, like while experiencing dance training and like trying to break out of whatever like whatever senses of constraint I feel. What does it feel like to have your art in spaces, being seen, um, after going through the process of experiencing them on your own and then letting them into the world for other people to experience?
Yeah. Well, I will say that I've been very lucky so far. Uh, I've had the opportunity to show my work. Um, mm, uh, by the time I'm done with work, like I just don't want to see it anymore. Um, to be honest, I know a lot of artists feel that way. Like, there's so much labor that goes on just making it that it's done. It's like it's okay, on to the next. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's I mean, that's sort of the whole point is uh, you make these things and in a way you're making them for yourself, but the end goal is to let it go and let it be somebody else's. Um, and um, yeah, and like having that opportunity to have some of my works like in like different contexts, like even makes my experience of the work different, uh, changes the way that I see it, which is just good. just helps me in the studio. Um, because I'm sure it's the same for you as it is for probably every artist, that when you sit down and you have to start a new work, you start and you're like, okay, how have I done this any other time before? It's just like doing it all over again for the first time. Um, so yeah, I don't know. This sort of like,
I agree. It's almost like meeting yourself again, like having to sit down and be like, okay, girl, how are you? That's
honestly,
how I feel right now. I'm supposed to be preparing for something, and I want to watch a video.
I know, right? Oh my
It's
God.
so crazy. It's so bad. But I know that like once I finally just do get over that part, I get so involved, and that is when I feel so happy, like just being so involved. And like you said earlier, like letting go of yourself. That is when I feel most happy. Just being so involved in what I'm writing or whatever I'm doing. Yeah, I definitely agree. And the letting go part, when you said like when you finish something, and you let it go for other people to experience it, that has been a challenge for me, like letting go of things that I create. Just always wanting to, I think a part of me struggles with letting things be, like that control part, no longer having the control once you've done your part. I think that's something that I am still learning how to be in collaboration in so many different ways with other people. Yeah. And I can be very protective of myself. And I'm just learning, you know, to find a medium between that, because I know that that is so necessary in ways, but also there are simply times where I shouldn't do that. And so I'm just like finding a balance within that for sure.
Yeah, it's like sort of what I was going back to, this idea of like a painting, for example, just being something as simple as an idea. Um, I don't know. It sort of takes a lot of the weight off of it having to be perfect or having to be good. Um, and I think that's sort of an important thing, at least in my case, because I do tend to want to get things like perfect, like whatever that is in my head. Um, and they just never end up being like that. And that's okay. It's just like that process of getting better. And if you if I make a painting that's bad, which I have done, I have like a huge painting that I worked on for so long, like a year. It looks like shit. Um, you just gotta take it for what it is and um, just move on to the next one.
Do you still find like even in do you plan on sharing that painting or no?
Um, maybe if I can get it right, but I'm not gonna even look at it for a long time.
Okay. Do you find any like anything that you can take from that experience, even if you don't end up sharing it, that is like that just anything you can take with you?
Yeah. Part of the reason why that one didn't really work, I think, is like when I do something like a face, for example, um, I found through failing on works like that that I have to get the face right in one goal or in like one go in one day. Because otherwise the paint dries to a certain extent and trying to paint on top of it um just I don't know, it just doesn't work. So yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you have to fail a big one to understand something about your own process that um, hopefully just makes it easier, like moving forward.
I want to do an exercise with you, only if you are down for it. I wanted to know if you would like to. Earlier, I mentioned that I sometimes either convert writing that I do into a painting or a painting into a piece or a poem or anything. Do you want to do that?
Sure.
Yeah, I would love to take um anything that we've created, maybe you take one of your paintings and convert it into a piece or write something from it. And I'll do the same with something of mine.
Yeah, totally.
Amazing. Mine is quite simple, I feel. Very straight to the point. I ended up choosing a different one. I chose this one, which is another self-portrait. It was bold to confront himself in the hot corner of his room. His figure floated like a cloud and mist. He disappeared behind his truth, and they could not find him ever again. His voice was handed to him by the sun as he acknowledged its brightness. Although it was hard to look into, he reviewed his gift. He received his gift, the flowers that were once his fingers curled inward as he kept his new delight.
You post your paintings anywhere?
I don't, yeah. I've been keeping them all, saving them all for myself,
I want to see more.
hoarding them all. Um, I think I definitely will. I feel like I have a few pieces that I feel like would be nice to share.
I like what I saw so far.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
And based on this painting that's in progress. Like, okay, here we go. Swan song. First thing in the morning. Right. What a shame. My last performance. But we're so early. I guess I'm gonna say, might as well surrender to it. This will be my last, final act. Curtain call. All right. No chance to start again. No revisions, or aspirations, false starts, or wanting. Worry is out the door. Here, steady your eyes. Watch me. I don't know. I kind of get titles for paintings sometimes before I even do them. So I think this one was going to be called Swan Song. Yeah, I don't know. That was fun. I like doing that.
Thank you. That was beautiful. It's amazing. Would you say that those were this person's thoughts?
Yeah. Or, yeah, I don't know. In a way, my thoughts of what they're thinking.
Okay.
Maybe it's not, but
Well, thank you for doing this exercise with me. I really, really enjoy that. And also, it's nice to pull out these paintings because I feel like I don't spend enough time with them, honestly.
I was going to say, I really like that form of the painting with the text on the same thing.
Thank you. I really, I always feel like there's always something to pair it with because I think I wrote this before I painted this. Sometimes it happens a lot, or maybe after. Um, Actually, yeah, this piece is something that is tending as Pink Mountain now that I read it. It's fading, but it's still there. Um, yeah, I have one more question for you. Um, and I feel like it's a vague one. It's something that anyone could ask, but I mean this in the least vague way. What does making art do for you that almost nothing else can?
It gives me a more complex challenge than I think anything else does, or many things do. Um, yeah, in a way, it gives me more complex answers than anything else I think can.
I would say for me, there's so much clarity in creating. I know that I think I've always been somebody who looked to other people for answers. And once I learned that a lot of the answers were already something that I possess for myself. And yeah, I think creating is just a way for me to acknowledge that and acknowledge myself. It's so hard sometimes to face myself, I feel, for whatever reason. And I think that's because I'm still processing so many things. Um, and, you know, I feel being 23, like I've experienced so much already. Like even just being a person, and I feel like even at the age of 10, we've experienced so much already. Like so many different energies, so many different opinions, and it shapes people. And I feel like as I'm like combing through all of that, there are moments where I feel it's hard to face myself when I feel resentment or when I feel betrayal or when I feel negative emotions. Um, it's harder to be with myself then. And I think creating an art and writing really lends me this sense of perspective where I can really just honor the fact that I'm going through these feelings and still try to like be there for myself in that way. And also giving it to other people who are experiencing similar things helps me like feel better about it or like take myself out of it for a moment. Um, yeah, and also I use writing especially to reimagine myself in my life and to imagine possibilities. Because like I mentioned earlier, before I started dancing, I would write about dancing a lot and write about it as if it were true. Um, and now I find myself in some of what I've written about, which is so weird and amazing at the same time. Well, that's really all I have, honestly. But is there anything else that you want to ask or mention?
Um, I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
But overall, I mean, I really enjoyed this, and thank you really for sitting down with me. I feel like this is something that I need a lot more of, especially now. Because I started doing this in lockdown and doing it more coming out of that time, but I feel myself needing a lot of this more spaces like this more, and just talking to people um, who understand the importance of creating an art and storytelling.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to connect, even though we're not like actually face to face.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's great. Thank you.
And thank you.